Good morning, everybody. Now, there's been a real turn up for the books here because just a couple of days ago, I was really concerned that the UK government, the Starmer regime, was going to allow Ukraine to deploy Storm Shadow weapons to fire deep into Russia and hit targets in Russia, which would have escalated the conflict there to World War III very, very quickly. He still wants to do that, clearly. And he went to the United States, to the White House with David Lammy. I can't believe that he's the Foreign Secretary of the UK, to speak to President Biden to discuss and have talks with what to do with these things. Clearly, the Starmer regime wanted to ask Biden to have permission to use these, to give you to Ukraine permission to use them, and he thought that he could just go and talk and it would all be a done deal. But incredibly, President Biden has said no. Ukraine cannot have permission to use Storm Shadow missiles to fire into Russia. Now, the reason why he gets a veto is because there are American components within the missiles. So the missiles are British, they're constructed and built mostly in the UK, but they have American components in them. So the rules are that every country that provides components or parts to a piece of weaponry has to sign off on something for it to be used by a foreign country. So, the UK could use them where we like, but if Ukraine wants to use them, it has to have the permission of the UK government and the US government because of the American components in it, because you could say both countries are jointly responsible for a part of them, the UK most, but America a part of these weapons systems. So Biden has said no, that Ukraine cannot use them to fire into Russia, which is perhaps the first sensible thing that he's decided in about 4 years. I don't know why suddenly he's made a good decision here after allowing escalation after escalation in the Ukraine conflict before now, but this is, whether it's temporary or permanent, is at least a few days breathing space. Hopefully then this will become permanent. Everyone will realize this is a dreadful, utterly ridiculous thing to be doing, and this will destroy the reputation of the Starmer regime. I have no idea why he particularly wants to allow these missiles to be fired into Russia. I can only assume that he's linked with the cabal that wants this to happen. But very interestingly as well, just this morning, we have reports that 5 former UK defence secretaries have put together a joint statement with the former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, calling on Keir Starmer to allow Ukraine to use these weapons even without the consent of Biden in the White House and the US government. Boris Johnson's reported to have said, this is from the Standard, there's no conceivable case for delay. Well, yes, there is, because the rules of engagement of weapon systems mean that the US government has to give permission because they've got American components in the missiles. So that is the reason why there is a delay. And I hope it's not just a delay. I hope it is a decision which sticks and is permanent, because we cannot be escalating the conflict any further. It shouldn't have been escalated to now. As I've said from the very beginning, this could have ended. This conflict didn't even need to happen. It happened, obviously, for reasons going back to 2014 when there was a CIA-backed coup in Ukraine that ousted Yanukovych and put in Poroshenko, and then they got Zelensky afterwards, who's carrying on Poroshenko's pro-cabal policies and pro-cabal stance, if you like. So the 5 former defence secretaries that have put their names to this statement are Grant Shapps, Ben Wallace, Gavin Williamson, Penny Mordaunt, and Liam Fox. Now, I don't think any of them are still MPs. I think maybe one of them is, I don't know. But most of them, if not all of them, were lost their seats in the general election in the UK in July this year. So, and of course, Boris Johnson is no longer an MP, even less the PM. So those six who have made this joint statement are like, the living dead come back from the dead, the political dead, like vampires to advocate for more death, more escalation, more conflict, more war, more debt, everything that is opposite to what the world needs. We do not need to escalate to World War III. We need to de-escalate and end this conflict to stop the loss of more lives. And tragically, it's young men, mostly young Christian men, who are being sent to the front lines, whether it's Ukraine or Russia, to fight each other. I have no sympathies for the neo-Nazis in charge of the armed forces in Ukraine that are linked to the Zelensky regime. Zelensky's obviously a Jew. I don't know how this works when you have a Jewish president who is running the military and the security systems with neo-Nazis. I mean, explain that to me, someone. I don't know. But what this is about, of course, is this is not for the benefit of the Ukrainian people. This is not for the benefit of the British or American or any other people in the West. This war, prolonging this war, is for the benefit of the financial cabal that has bought up Ukrainian assets on the cheap. They think that they can push Russia out of Ukraine, as they say, win the war against Putin. That's not going to happen because Russia is moving gradually with increasing speed across the Donbass to take control of areas where there were always Russian-speaking, a Russian-speaking majority there in the south and east of Ukraine. So BlackRock and JP Morgan and Lockheed Martin and Boeing and the other companies that are making money from assets gathering on the cheap and selling weapons, for billions and tens of billions, hundreds of billions of pounds of profit, are going to lose big. So they are the biggest losers in this financially, but they don't care how many people die for a few greedy wicked people in the cabal to make a little bit of profit, to take some assets, to set up whatever they want to set up in Ukraine. And, they are far, far worse for the West than Putin will ever be. This is happening in eastern Ukraine. It's nothing to do with ordinary people in the West. We don't want this to continue. We want British money spent on British people, on British services, like pensioners getting their winter fuel allowance, or us having a decent energy infrastructure or a decent health service. That's what people in this country want our money to be spent on. We don't want it to be spent on prolonging a war somewhere which is of nothing to do with Britain, and I'm sure every other Western country's people feel the same. This is absolutely nothing to do with us. There's no benefit to the people in the West whatsoever. In fact, the sanctions that the idiotic governments have put on Russia are actually harming the West economically and in other ways, because energy is more expensive, because we used to buy gas from Russia at a good price, a reasonable price. It was a win-win. Russia could sell their gas, we would buy their gas at a good price, and we could heat our homes and power our industries. But the powers that be and the governments in the West and the supranational organizations like the EU have said, no, we're going to put sanctions on Russia to stop us from trading with Russia on this and that and the other. So now we have to buy fertilizer and fuel more expensively from other places around the world. It doesn't make any sense if you are sensible, but it makes sense if you are in this parasitic cabal who wants to set up their own state in Ukraine and do what they want there with the digital currencies and digital identity and control the minerals and control the agriculture and set up what's bioweapons labs and all of these kind of things that have been found. That's what they want to do with Ukraine, while they run down the societies and culture and economies of the West. Because the parasitic cabal does not care about the economy and the culture and the history of the countries that they've set up in. And they certainly don't care about Ukraine either. So those are the people who will lose big if they don't get the escalation that they want. So there we go. It is very, very surprising, but a piece of good news in a way that Biden, for once, surprisingly, out of the blue, has made a good decision to prevent, for the moment anyway, Ukraine from firing British cruise missiles, Storm Shadow missiles, into Russia to destroy Russian infrastructure and kill Russian people. And let's hope that he doesn't change his mind on that. And let's hope also that somehow the crazy Starmer regime, he's a maniac who wants to escalate war here for no benefit for the British people whatsoever. Let's hope that somehow he is removed from office